Hey everyone, this is Mike Wolf. Welcome to the Smart Kitchen Show. It's been a little bit of a while. We've been busy running around putting on a food robot show in San Francisco, and I'm heading off to Europe. But I wanted to get this conversation out because I had an interesting conversation with the CEO of a company called Solar Foods, a company that basically creates food out of thin air. If you read The Spoon, if you're into food tech, you've probably seen a few of these articles talking about this new class of startups. Catherine Lamb wrote a great post on The Spoon, basically encapsulating this new crop of startups, basically creating food using a technology called gas fermentation. And so I wanted to catch up with one of these companies and hear a little bit more and put it into podcast. So that's what this is. My conversation today is with Pasi Vainikka. I think I got that right. He's out of Finland. The company's based in Finland. And it's a great conversation. It's a little bit tech heavy, a little bit nerdy, but I think our listeners will like that. So I hope you enjoy it. If you're going to be at Seeds and Chips, I will be there next week. I will be there on the 6th. Go ahead and reach out to me on Twitter, DM me if you want to connect. I'll also be heading out to the BSH Appliances Kitchen Tech Accelerator. I'll be there in Munich next week as well. So I hope to connect with some companies there. And I'll be cataloging it all on Twitter, also on our Slack, Spoon Slack. So join that if you haven't already. And hopefully we'll have a couple posts out of it. So, all right, that's it for now. Let's get to the podcast. I'm excited to have Pasi Vainikka. I think I got that right. I may not have. Of the CEO of Solar Foods. How you doing, Pasi?
Yeah, I'm good.
Did I get your last name right? I was worried about that.
That was perfect.
Okay. And you're the CEO of a company called Solar Foods. You're based out of Finland, and you guys have been in the news lately. We've certainly written about you at The Spoon for doing something that sounds pretty great in a headline, creating food out of thin air, essentially. So I want to get into that and talk about the nuts and bolts of what you're doing, but tell us a little bit about Solar Foods. What's your elevator pitch when you tell people at a party what Solar Foods is?
Yeah, if we want to make significantly better food in terms of environmental performance, so reduce environmental impact of food production by 10 or 100 times, then we think that we need to disconnect from agriculture, disconnect from the concept of photosynthesis and plants and the concept of animal, and that's what we are doing.
So you're doing that by basically using CO2 or kind of gas that we breathe out, and you're somehow getting protein out of that. So you could probably do a much better job explaining this. How does what you do work? How does the technology work?
Yeah, what we do is we provide to microbes the minimal requirements that are needed to turn something into edible calories and provide fundamentals for life. And you need carbon, you need energy, possibly hydrogen and oxygen or water, and some nutrients. And that's what, for example, plants get from sunlight and get from soil. But instead of using photosynthetic plants, we use specific microbes that can use carbon dioxide that we can capture from the air as a source of carbon. And then the energy is not through sunlight, but we split water to hydrogen and oxygen and basically give this hydrogen together with CO2 to the microbes for the source of energy and carbon. And this way we can actually go around photosynthesis and be more efficient. And then actually we don't need land or a typical climate or weather that you need to grow plants.
So like, as you said, you're disconnecting from land. You're actually disconnecting from the need to use energy from solar. And part of the reason that's relevant and what you've been one of your recent engagements that you've been in the news for is you guys are working with the European Space Agency and trying to work with them on a project to figure out how to feed people in space for long-term space travel, like 7 years. So talk a little bit about that, because that's a very closed loop system. You don't have all these inputs like sun. You have basically CO2 that you have to recycle. Talk about some of the work you're doing with the European Space Agency.
Yeah, so because we don't need arable land to produce food, we can have, even in space, the basic fundamentals what we need for the solar foods production. So there's a lot of solar energy available, and carbon dioxide you can recycle in the space vehicle or at the destination. If you're in Mars, actually the gas atmosphere in Mars is CO2. So you have the basic ingredients there. What you then need to do is establish the cycle, closed loop cycle of inorganics, so nitrogen and different kinds of salts that you need to give for any life forms, basically. And that is what we're looking at now carefully, that how we can provide that. So once we've established the solution for the inorganics recirculation, then we think that the concept is on paper ready. We're doing kind of a desktop study now that includes also some tests for a concept actually at the lab for the closing the loop for inorganics. If that works, then we hope to proceed to actually make a first version of the actual reactor that could be taken with to space, or it actually might be, it's a detail, but still that these devices could be sent beforehand to Mars, so they're waiting there for the crew. But still, these are the issues that we work on now.
And this isn't necessarily a new concept. I think that people have been thinking about doing, for example, you call gas fermentation in space. I think NASA had some projects, right, going back some years.
That's correct. NASA had, and the Soviets had, and if you go back to those papers, it's actually very interesting stuff what you can find there. Actually, a lot of now public CIA reports on what Soviets were planning around this, producing food, possibly in space, but also in Siberia, where you cannot really grow anything during the winter, but turning, for example, natural gas into protein and calories. So that can be also done. So basically, this has a history in connection to space research, as has cultured meat. But now, if we want to live within the planetary limits, Earth is kind of a spaceship, and if we want to appreciate the limits of the planet, then basically it is like a spaceship. And now we might suddenly have a practical application for this technology decades after on Earth.
And is that why you and a crop of other startups, there's a nascent group of about 4 or 5 of you, are kind of rebooting and kind of looking at this? Is it because you look at the limited resources? The Earth, as you say, maybe a spaceship. We're kind of contained in terms of what resources we can use. We need to start thinking about using them more efficiently. Is that why we're seeing essentially a reboot of this concept and extra attention paid to it now?
Yeah, I think there are several things. I think what we do, it's part of the storyline of new and alternative foods. So there has been a lot of talk on cultured meat, plant-based meat alternatives, and insects. So after all this talk, then it's what we do can be kind of understood and perceived well. If we would have been proposing this 5 or 10 years ago, we would have been just too odd. But now it's kind of it's a good time to propose new concepts. People are open. Companies are open for really new proposals for new kinds of food stuff. And then if you go to the fundamentals, much of the environmental impact that people are also asking about is due to the concept of agriculture, fertilizers, pesticides, water use, irrigation, and also about the concept of animal. And if you want to do something really much better, 10 or 100 times better, then you could actually look at that. Is there a way to go around that? And what we're doing is that, and then the environmental benefits that people seem to appreciate more and more, then are kind of a follow-up from that.
Yeah, so in a sense, you're saying, an alternative rising tide, alternative protein rising tide has been lifting all boats. You guys have been benefiting from the conversation of looking at things like plant-based and cellular meat. It's interesting that you guys are like saying, okay, we disconnect from agriculture altogether. So in a way, are you saying you're even moving beyond plant-based, because plant-based food actually does have a tax on agriculture, does have a tax on the earth. You guys are allowing and kind of creating an even more efficient method of creating protein?
Yeah, you got that right, and that's exactly the point we want to make. That there are two ways to how to approach new food. One is that you want to make something that people are familiar with in a different way, which, for example, plant-based,
like the Impossible Burger, right?
Exactly. So it is kind of made, but it isn't. But it's very similar, and people usually like this approach. And you make plant-based milk and drinks and stuff like that, and you use still agricultural products for that, and it's okay. What we looked at is that if you want to take the maximum out of the physics, and using still what we're using is naturally occurring organisms, but still you would take the minimal requirements what you can provide. We think electricity, carbon neutral electricity, at the end solar PV is the new primary energy, and we need to leave the fossil carbon in the ground. So what you're basically left with is if you go to desert, you have the solar energy available, and you can milk the air for water and capture CO2. And then there was the question that, can you turn these into calories? And you can do that, and then you end up with a powder. So, and then you start to wonder that the physics and the storyline is good at its best there, but then you end up with a powder, and now our what we're looking at mostly now is that what are the applications of this powder? So it's a different approach than thinking that let's make something from plants that resembles meat. And I think there are a surprisingly diverse way to use this powder product, what we do.
How scalable is this, right? So like when we talk about like being highly efficient, you're talking about kind of taking the natural organisms that are in the air and turning into consumable protein. There is a process there, right? There's a fermentation process. How scalable is this? Are we looking at a future where you can foresee a bioreactor in like every home, and basically someone being able to create enough protein and calories for a household? Or if it's centralized, can you do this in a centralized facility where you're creating enough to feed like a local town? Talk about that.
I think scaling is one, and then the optimal size of unit is a different thing. Now, scaling in terms of scaling production to high volumes and being able to supply the market, there I think we really have an advantage and good positioning in a very strategic way, because food production is technology. It is, as you said, fermentation technology. So if you want to double the production, you buy another fermenter. It's very simple, and there is no kind of upstream sourcing that you're limited by your suppliers, for example. So you can go to desert, make it. If you want to double the production, you buy another set of equipment. Then the other issue is the optimal size of equipment. We are really in doubt that home reactors would be the thing to go. When you look at the cost structure of the production line, what we're proposing, there is some economy of scale. There is capital cost and of course electricity cost, but also you need some people to supervise this plant. So if it's very small, then it might not turn out to be good. We are going to publish the results from the pre-engineering study of our investment plan for a full-scale factory in Q3 this year, and that's something what we're working on now heavily. So let's see what the outcome for that is, but it will be a real location, in this case in Finland, where we can produce about 10,000 tons per year.
So it sounds like, at least in the initial life of this type of product that you'll be producing, that ultimately is productized and turned into protein that goes into consumable products, it's going to be a professional scenario. Fermentation happens at a centralized facility in a factory. It sounds like, because it needs to be overseen by professionals. But is there a scenario where you see, like in 10 years from now, much like we've seen with, for example, beer brewing, where software and technology enables essentially a mini micro brewing factory to go into the home? Can you see technology, software, automation creating a fermentation device where it could be like a home bioreactor?
Well, I mean, what we're doing for the European Space Agency is kind of a version of a home reactor. Right. So I can't say no. But one thing is that technically, yes, you can do that for sure. Why not? Actually, we do have in our laboratory that scale of device running already and has been for a while. But if you want to supply the food industry with a cost-competitive ingredient, that's kind of another storyline. So it depends in which roadmap you're looking at.
And how did you get into this, right? This is something you just didn't wake up with one day and said, hey, let's create like food out of thin air. You were actually working for an organization called VTT, which is a research institute for Finland. And you guys were doing some early research in this space, right?
Yeah. So in short, I've worked 15 years in energy research. And my last job at VTT, our National Research Institute, was until the end of 2017, was to run the single largest renewable energy research program we've had this country so far. And there were basically two key findings, well, maybe several, but two to mention here. One is that electricity in a carbon neutral future, in carbon neutral world, will be the primary energy. Exploring fossil fuels, burning them, whether it's cars or power plants, industrial processes, is a bad idea if we want to limit the global warming. The second thing is that once the fossils are left in the ground in the future, then CO2 is actually quite convenient source of carbon for fuels, for food, and for replacing plastics. How planes fly in 2050 and so on. So you can make fuels out of air. But then, if you would do all that, so the technology to change the energy system to carbon neutral, even based only on renewables, is technically possible today. The rest is political will. But even if you would do all that, according to the IPCC reports, that is actually not good enough to change the whole energy system, but about 20 to 25% of the greenhouse gas emissions due to human action is due to what we eat. So we also need to do something there. And with this history, it is quite easy to understand that we started to wonder, could you make edible calories from electricity and CO2 and air? And then my colleague, Juha-Pekka Pitkänen, who is the CTO of Solar Foods, had a solution for that. And then we made a proof of concept for that at the Research Institute. And we then kind of span off from the Institute based on that. Then myself, I later learned that, okay, this had been already thought of in connection to space research. And as such, this concept can be used freely. Then basically the magic is in the microbes, so which one you use and how efficient they are.
So this is a fairly technical conversation, but I always kind of go to my perspective and look through at things through the lens of more of like a business market analyst lens. And I do see when I look at this space, based on conversations with you and a few others, like I said, a nascent group of companies starting to form. So it seems like there's beginning to be momentum. You have peers that are also looking to do gas fermentation or kind of taking CO2 inputs and creating protein. Can you talk a little bit about the landscape? It's very early. It's an embryonic space, but you're not alone in the space, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's great to see several companies with different approaches, also with the same approach, what we have, and telling the storyline. People get familiar. They're not frightened of new food. And what we also can then do is attract interest from the big industries. So they seem to be more and more open for new protein sources. And as said, new things, people and customers start to ask questions about the environmental impact and about the sort of the history and storyline around this food. And it's a good time for all these companies together kind of provide solution for the food problem that we evidently have.
Yeah, and it's a mix of academic, obviously, because so much of it is based on research. So academic actors and some kind of startups that are getting funding. You guys, a few others in Europe, and then the Bay Area. You mentioned how there are big big companies kind of starting to sniff around and talk to you guys. How would you characterize that? Are they big CPG brands? Are they ag players? Can you kind of characterize who those players are? Not naming names, but the type of companies and what the questions are asking are.
I would say protein ingredients are used a lot in the industry, in consumer products, in a very diverse way. So I would say it's what we don't see that much is the agriculture industry, but those are that are very close to consumer. And want to have new kinds of products on the shelf and provide new alternatives to people, and they who kind of are sensing the market and really see what products sell, and they're also looking for benefits and kind of competitive advantage in introducing new foods and proteins. And when the new companies emerge, they're completely new kind of solutions. There's a lot of interest for us and our peers.
When do you think will be the first consumer product? When I go to the store, I go to an Albertsons here in the U.S. I go to a store in Europe somewhere, and I buy a packaged food product that actually has protein made by the methods that you're researching, you're working on. Do you think this is something that I can go to the store and buy a product in 2 or 3 years, or is this more like a 5 to 10 year type of time frame?
I have something to propose in 2 to 3 year time scale, and then after 10 years. So the first one would be the category. What we're looking at could be the first one on the market. Is within existing foods. For example, it can be plant-based yogurts or ready meals, or between meals. shakes and so on, or in bread, in pasta, or even pizza bread. So you're kind of protein ingredient in an existing product. Equally, it could be part of the proteins in plant-based meat alternatives. So they do use bean and pea proteins and soy protein, potato proteins. So we could be there, like you said, the Impossibles and Beyonds. And then the third category, what we're also following is that if cultured meat would be scaling fast in near future, then they also need to provide the cells with amino acids and sugars. And we think actually we could provide that amino acid cocktail that is in the cultured medium, and thereby provide the very fundamental disconnection from agriculture also for the cultured meat production. So all these alternatives are open, but I would say the go-to-market strategy would be around an existing product where you provide just a new ingredient.
Right. So it makes it sound like, protein bars, shakes, that's kind of the consumer facing products that you can see in the near term. And then the two other channels.
Let's say ready lasagna,
yep.
or soil in between meals, this kind of products. Or I would still say that the plant-based meat alternative is a very good platform also to integrate it.
Well, it's been great to learn about. It's an exciting and early area, and I'm always intrigued about the new thing. And this is like when we're talking about alternative proteins, so much of the conversation has been about lab grown meat, or like there's a lot of momentum obviously around plant based today. Beyond Meat actually went public. It's really kind of the first big IPO for a plant based player like that. But you guys are doing something completely different and like you say, disconnecting from the earth. So and there is, like I said, a growing kind of cohort of companies that are kind of dabbling in the space. So I think it's a nascent area that's worth watching, that we're certainly watching. So I appreciate you spending time with me and educating me a little bit about the marketplace.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Where can people, before we let you go, where can people find out more about Solar Foods?
Yeah, solarfoods.fi. We're also active in social media, so you can find us there.
All right. Well, Pasi, thank you so much for spending time with me.
Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the Smart Kitchen Show. Check out the Smart Kitchen Summit at smartkitchensummit.com. Find more content at thespoon.tech, and make sure to get more Smart Kitchen shows in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, this is Michael Wolf. Have a great week.